Hello and welcome back to Favourites Week, and today I'm going to be talking about my top 5 favourite modern novels. So these 5 are all modern novels. They're all written within the last 40 years. I think the oldest one is 1989, and then I think the rest of them are probably all 21st century. These 5 are probably not set in stone as much as my top 5 favourite classics, partly because I think I've read 2 of these twice and the rest I've only read once, so that makes a slight difference to it as well. But they are still books that I absolutely love, that I am very excited to recommend. I think I've spoken about all of them on this channel before, but I'm not sure I've spoken about quite how much I love them, so I'm very excited to talk about them today. At number 5 I have Reins by Sophie Cumberlew. This is a brilliant book. It almost feels wrong to say I like it because of the subject matter and because it is a harrowing book in some ways, or at least a slightly disturbing book. But one of the main reasons why it belongs on this list is because of all the books I've ever read, this is probably the book that I still think about the most, even though it's been quite a few years since I read it. I remember it so well in comparison to so many other books, and I still think about it regularly. It is a book that deals with so many important issues, a lot of them to do with truth and perspective. It does such interesting things with form, and it's such a wonderful, wonderful book. It follows 4 characters who as adults are looking back on their teenage years spent in Manchester. And they're looking back at a particular summer when they were 14, all 4 of them, and the 4 14-year-olds made a pact that they would all lose their virginity together in the 2 couples they were in, and everything went horribly wrong. It's very dark in places, but it's absolutely fascinating. The book is told through multiple perspectives, and I'm not talking like 3 or 4, I'm talking like 12 different viewpoint characters. You see a lot of different things from different characters' viewpoints. You get to hear from the 4 main characters looking back on their adolescence, but you also get to hear from their parents and the parish priest and so many other people looking back on what happened this summer, and in a way reflecting on the nature of truth. It's so brilliant, so amazing. I can't recommend this enough, partly because it's one of those books that really does leave you thinking about it for a long time. I really must reread this actually. I wonder if I might do it this year. It's not an easy book, but it is brilliantly written, brilliantly put together, so superbly thought out, I suppose. And yeah, I would absolutely recommend this. It is incredible. Really stay with me, as I said, and a brilliant book. At number 4 we have The Reins of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro, another one of my absolute favourite books. Obviously that is why it's on this list. We follow a man called Stevens. He has been a butler all of his life, and at the beginning of the book he starts to look back on his life and various things that happened in younger days. You can tell that I quite like looking back narratives. I do really enjoy them. In fact, I think everything on this list is a kind of looking back narrative. That's quite interesting, isn't it? Anyway, Stevens is reflecting back on his life, the life he has lived, his relationship with the housekeeper when he was a younger man, and everything that's happened in his life, and effectively whether his life has been worthwhile and whether he's made the right decisions. He is a very polite and sort of emotionally oppressed man to an extent, and the book explores his relationship with his own thoughts and feelings and his relationship with sort of his former self and the things that he's done in his life. It's just beautiful. It explores memory in such a really interesting way. It's wonderfully written. I think Stevens is such a believable and interesting character, and it's set in sort of the 1950s but looking back on the interwar period, which I love as well and find really interesting. And it's just wonderful. It's just brilliant. It's a book about sort of responsibility in some ways, your moral responsibility, but also your responsibility to yourself and what it means to have lived a life and be looking back on it. That sounds very vague, but it's amazing. I've read this one twice. I studied it at university and loved it so very much. I know I'd like to reread it again in the future because I do think it is a beautiful, wonderful book. But I think because I studied it at university as well, I have that sort of extra knowledge of it, extra love of it. I know probably some fair few quotes from it off by heart still, and I just think it's such a brilliant book. At number 3 we have If Nobody Speaks of Remarkable Things by John McGregor. He's one of my favourite writers, and this book is absolutely astoundingly written. When I first read it I was just amazed by the writing in it as well as by the structure. It is a dual narrative. In one half of the book we follow various people all living on the same street and what happened in the days leading up to a particular event. And then in the other half of the book we follow one of these characters who lived on that street, looking back on her life and looking back on what happened leading up to and leading away from that event. So there is this big event at the heart of the book which things sort of lead up to and lead away from. I don't in general like books that are that experimental. This book does not use speech marks, none of the characters are named, but somehow I love this anyway because it is beautiful, because it is staggering, because it is amazing in terms of what it does, in the beauty of the writing, but also in exploring the remarkableness of everyday things and the beauty in small moments. And yes, I love it very much. Then at number 2 I have The Loaner Quartet by Emily St. John Mandel. Emily St. John Mandel is possibly my favourite living author. I love her writing very much, and I think her books have that sort of perfect balance of beautiful, precise, interesting writing with great plots, with great characters, with great structure and setting. Her books are very, very plot driven in some senses, but also they're amazingly written and really, really enjoyable. Her characters are so well developed, and she is just the master. She is just amazing. It's interesting, I read this book back in 2016, and when I did my video of my favourite books of the year for 2016, I put this at number 2 before The Luminaries. But although I really love The Luminaries a lot, and I might like to reread it at some point in the future, this has stayed with me much more, and that's why I know that it's one of my favourite books of all time. And also, I think because I love Emily St. John Mandel's writing so much, and this is my favourite by her, it kind of like promotes it even more, if you see what I mean. We follow Gavin, who is in his late 20s, looking back on the summer he left high school and everything that kind of happened to do with his girlfriend who disappeared, to do with the friends he was in this jazz quartet with, and everything that's kind of happened since. I love the structure, I love the writing, I love the characterization, I find the plot so gripping but also believable and fascinating. I find it such an interesting and powerful book. I love the way that music runs through this as such a fascinating motif and such an important theme, and I just love so many things in this book. I love the kind of looking back, the changes between the 18-year-olds and the 28-year-olds, and it's just amazing. It's just amazing. It's very, very amazing. But at number 1, definitely my favourite modern novel of all time, I have The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. Reading The 13th Tale, I have these two sort of conflicting feelings. One feeling is that this book has been written expressly for me, and the other feeling is that I really, really, really wish I had written this book. This is like book goals, just, yeah. The 13th Tale follows a woman called Margaret Lee, and she is invited by this mysterious author to come and see her and to write her biography. Vida Winter is an incredibly successful writer, but nobody knows anything about her life, and Margaret Lee goes to see her, and Vida Winter starts to tell her the story of her life, looking back on everything that's happened in her life when she was growing up in this mysterious house. It's a book about the love of books, and it's also incredibly gothic, it's also incredibly moving, it's also got unreliable narrators, a fascinating structure, brilliant, brilliant characters, literary references like everywhere, and just so many things that I love. It's poignant and clever, and it has a beautiful, beautiful plot. I cannot recommend this enough, especially if you like books and you like Victorian literature. This is so good. It is so good. I've read this twice before, but I'm hoping to reread it later on this year, and I'm hoping to host a read-along in September because I love this book a lot, and I think that a lot of other people would love it too. So yes, those are my top 5 favourite modern novels. Let me know down in the comments what your top 5 favourite modern novels are. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back tomorrow with another part of Favourites Week.